Sarah had always been a pragmatic person. As a security guard, she had seen her fair share of strange occurrences during her night shifts, from malfunctioning alarms to wandering animals. However, nothing had prepared her for the night she would spend alone in the quiet, dimly lit offices of Everwood Enterprises. The building stood at the edge of a sprawling business park, surrounded by dense woods that seemed to encroach on its borders. During the day, it buzzed with activity as employees hustled about, but by night, it was an eerie and desolate place. Sarah settled into her small office, glancing at the clock. It was nearing 2 a.m., and the stillness of the night had settled over the building like a shroud. She leaned back in her chair, trying to stay alert and focused on the security monitors that displayed different areas of the building. As minutes turned into hours, the monotony of the night shift began to take its toll. Sarah fought to keep her eyes open, the only sounds being the hum of the building's ventilation system and the occasional distant hoot of an owl. Then, without warning, the silence was shattered by the shrill ring of the phone on her desk. Startled, Sarah jolted upright, her heart racing. She glanced at the caller ID, but it displayed only a string of random numbers. Hesitating for a moment, she finally picked up the receiver. "Hello?" she said, her voice tinged with uncertainty. All she heard in response was a strange, crackling static that seemed to grow louder with each passing second. Sarah frowned, thinking it might be a technical glitch. "Is someone there?" she asked again, but the static persisted. Then, beneath the crackling, she heard faint whispers, like distant voices carried on the wind. The words were unintelligible, their meaning lost in the hiss of the static. Sarah's unease deepened. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was on the other end of the line. As the seconds ticked by, the whispers grew more distinct, and Sarah could almost make out the words. They were fragmented and disjointed, as if spoken by multiple voices at once. It was impossible to decipher their meaning, but they sent shivers down her spine. In a moment of unease, she hung up the phone and leaned back in her chair, her eyes fixed on the security monitors. Her gaze swept over the empty hallways and darkened offices, but everything appeared as it should, deserted and still. Sarah attempted to reassure herself, attributing the strange call to interference or perhaps a prank from a colleague. However, an unsettling sensation lingered, and she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her from the shadows. Hours passed, and Sarah continued her rounds through the building, checking locked doors and ensuring the security of the premises. It was around 3:30 a.m. when Sarah decided to review the security footage from earlier in the night. She hoped to find a logical explanation for the strange call, perhaps a glitch or a technical malfunction. As she rewound the footage, she couldn't help but feel a growing sense of dread. As the playback reached the timestamp of the mysterious call, Sarah's eyes widened. She saw herself answering the phone, her face contorted with confusion as she listened to the crackling static and whispers. But what unsettled her the most was what she saw in the background of the footage, a shadowy figure standing by her desk. The figure was tall and indistinct, its features obscured by darkness. It appeared to be watching her, its gaze fixed on her as she spoke into the phone. Sarah's heart raced as she watched herself hang up the phone and turn to face the figure, but by then, it had vanished into the shadows. Her hands trembling, Sarah rewound the footage again, scrutinizing every detail. The figure's presence sent a chill down her spine, and she couldn't fathom how anyone could have entered the building without setting off the alarms. Determined to get to the bottom of it, Sarah decided to check the security cameras located outside the building. She fast-forwarded through the footage, her eyes scanning the empty parking lot and the surrounding woods. But there was nothing, no sign of any intruders, no movement in the darkness. As she was about to give up, something caught her eye in the footage from earlier in the night. It was a flicker of movement at the edge of the woods, something that seemed to materialize from the darkness itself. Sarah zoomed in on the figure, her heart pounding as she realized it was the same shadowy presence she had seen in her office. The figure, barely discernible, moved closer to the building, its form shifting and contorting as it approached. It was as though it were composed of shadows, an entity that defied explanation. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she watched it glide through the parking lot, heading toward the entrance. Panicked, Sarah rushed to the security panel and armed the building's alarms. She then grabbed her flashlight and her phone, ready to call the police. But just as she reached for the phone, it rang again, the same random numbers flashing on the caller ID. With trembling hands, she answered it, her voice quivering. "Who are you? What do you want?" This time, there was no static, no whispers. Instead, a voice, cold and chilling, emanated from the other end. "I've been waiting for you," it said, the words dripping with malevolence. Before Sarah could respond, the lights in the building flickered and dimmed, plunging her into darkness. Terrified, she fumbled for her flashlight and shone it around the room. But she was not alone. In the dim beam of her flashlight, she saw the shadowy figure from the security footage, standing inches away from her. Sarah's scream echoed through the empty building as the figure drew closer, its presence cold and oppressive. Desperation and fear washed over her, and she bolted for the exit, running blindly through the darkened hallways. Behind her, she could hear the figure's unearthly footsteps, a relentless pursuit that seemed to defy the laws of nature. As she burst through the front doors and into the parking lot, she was greeted by the blinding light of police car headlights. Officers had responded to the building's alarm, summoned by the security system she had activated. They found her trembling and incoherent, her flashlight clutched tightly in her hand. But when they swept the building with their flashlights and searched the surrounding woods, they found no trace of the shadowy figure. Sarah's ordeal left her haunted by the events of that night. She could offer no explanation for the mysterious phone call or the entity that had seemingly materialized from the darkness.